Hey, good afternoon. This is Clark Neighbors with BIS Commodities with the market review for the week ending March 16, 2018. This week's famously known as the beginning of March Madness. We've seen a fair amount of madness in the markets early part of March. This week seemed to quiet down some. For the week, corn down roughly 8 cents, wheat down 22 cents, beans up 11 cents. So tend to see some ebb and flow of these markets, more of a consolidating, chopping type trade, at least for this week. But the key thing to keep in mind is the big movement during the rally earlier in the week, or earlier in the month. We've seen a fair amount, or in some cases a lot of producer movement and selling, and logistically moving bushels to town, into the marketplace, into the pipeline. And because of that, starting to see basis back off a bit, and in some areas more than a bit, in localized areas based on logistics. Again, keep in mind the Ohio River was shut down for some time. We have the Mid-Miss opening up right now, so there is quite a bit of grain moving back into the pipeline. With that going forward, keep in mind this week we had some good demand news. We continue to see very good export numbers on corn, pretty solid numbers on beans for this time of year. In fact, the corn number this week was the largest for this week going back 24 years. So it's encouraging to see the demand structure in the corn market. I think if you went back 4 or 5 months ago and polled many analysts that corn demand or corn exports would be at levels we're at, and seeing the disappointment to some degree on the opposite end of the spectrum on the beans, most people wouldn't have bought into that scenario at that time. So it's been very encouraging for the corn, and it could be encouraging going forward as the outstanding sales on corn are at nearly 1 billion bushels right now. So that means there should be some pretty good movement going forward. Now the opposite side of that is, keep in mind there's a lot of supply to go at those bushels also. The major factors affecting the market right now: weather, nonstop. Argentine weather is starting to become, as some guys say on the floor, more of a back burner issue. The crop is what the crop is going forward. Is the bean crop 40 million metric ton? Is it 45 million metric ton? The corn market the corn crop is somewhere in the 30s. So the point is that crop is probably stabilized. It is what it is going forward. The other weather issue that the market has been focusing on, and took some premium off the wheat market late this week, was the areas in Kansas, Oklahoma, and the Texas Panhandle. In some of those areas have had very little rain since the first of the year, if any, in some cases, and in areas where they haven't had rain in like 160 days. So there is some chance of some rains in Nebraska and parts of Kansas over the weekend, and then there's some more rains in the longer term maps. It's going to be key going forward as we see temperatures start to creep up, and if there's lack of moisture, that could have some impact on some of the early growth of that hard red winter wheat crop in the plains. So weather factors going forward, that's going to be key. Also keep in mind on March 29th we get the planting intentions report, and also the quarterly stocks report. A lot of conversations starting to build going into that, with analyst estimations on planted acres. Keep in mind most people are thinking corn and beans both are somewhere in the range around 90 million acres. If you run those numbers with something similar to the current demand estimates, you can still be roughly 2 bushels under trend line on beans and not have carryout go down. And theoretically you'd have to grow trend line or higher on corn to keep carryout about unchanged. So that looks a little encouraging possibly going forward for the corn, and a little discouraging for the soybeans. Cattle market this week, cash trade a little better. By the way, the futures market acted with some pressure. It looked like some fund liquidation. Struggled a little bit, especially late in the week, hit some good cash numbers on Tuesday and Wednesday, and since that time frame, the futures market has struggled. Outside markets, energies have had a little firmer trade this week. Dollar continues to be in flux with things going on in DC, and also just stability of financial markets right now that have had a lot more volatility of late over the last 40 to 60 days. So if you have any questions on any of these markets, feel free to call us at BIS Commodities. Phone number is 800-373-2525, or catch us on the web on biscommodities.com. With that, everyone have a great weekend.